Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Anybody have any stories of encounters with weird cults?
Be me, 40 years old. Yeah, I know I'm old. When I was 19, after university, I was kicking my heels, waiting to start my real job, so I took on a laboring job for a few months. I did 2 courses on health and safety and then worked as a pesticide operative, which is a fancy way of saying I walked about with a knapsack sprayer on my back, killing weeds. About my 3rd month in, my boss sent me to spray out unwanted saplings in a woodland in the north of England. I drove there on my own and was in my own car and worked alone, which meant I had some pretty relaxing days. I usually worked hard for 5 hours, getting further into the forest, then sat down, had a beer and walked back and called it a day. I had been there about 2 weeks working the woods. One hot day, I screwed up reading the map somehow and ended up way off course, and I panicked a bit and got more lost. It soon got dark and I was completely lost. There was little moonlight, and this was pre-mobile phones being commonplace. Whilst figuring out what to do, I sat down utterly pissed off, almost crying by this point. About 100 yards away, I heard movement. At first I thought it was a deer, but soon enough I heard voices. I thought it was guys shooting, but eventually I saw about 8 or 9 figures dressed in gray hooded robes. I was behind, and sort of below a fallen oak, and had a reasonably good view. They silently walked to this spot under this Scots pine tree, sort of stood in a circle, and just pointed at this one guy, gal. They just stood pointing like this for about 2 or 3 minutes. Then, the one being pointed at walked in one direction, whilst the others then walked away in another direction. It was all over in like 5 minutes. I spent an uneasy night, awake. I found my way out in the morning, and only worked a couple more weeks for that firm. I still wonder WTF that was all about.
I went out with a guy, in my goth phase, who drove a hearse. The kid was fucked up, but the hearse gave me spooks cred, so I let a lot slide. Anyway, he got ordained online. Cool, no big. Well, after that, he started his own religion. Church of the Vindershindies. Or something similar. He kept trying to convert kids around town to come to his house. He lived with his parents in their garage, which he turned into the church and worship. He told me he wanted tax-exempt status and to bring about a string of columbines so that the norms would see that Altsfolk shouldn't be messed with since Altsfolk are superior. That pretty solidly ended the relationship and my goth phase. I think he still has the hearse, but he didn't get more than 3 or 4 followers before the cops started to get curious about why a 24-year-old man kept bringing kids to his garage in the middle of the night.
I had met a group of people who were super friendly and we became friends. After a little bit of talking and finding out that I am into the occult and paganism, they tell me they actually have a group together. The group is composed of about 6 people including myself, but I was told that there was another group of 12 or so in a sect a few towns away. So I agreed to join this group and I have to make an oath. It's pretty basic, a promise to respect nature and to never harm another member. Alright, seems fair. So immediately after I say the oath, they then proceed to start telling me stories about how their group is actually an ancient group that was rediscovered when the head started talking to the spirits that ran the original group. This gets even weirder. The leader tells me that most of the people in the cult have psychic ability and that they can see the future. They also tell me that there is a demon that is out to get every member of this group and that one day we will all get a house together on a huge acre of land and train with weapons for the time the apocalypse comes and the gates to hell open. One of the guys in this group, who was actually kicked out of the group for being too dangerous, thought that he was the literal son of Satan and that he would one day take the throne of his father after he died. They were all 100% serious.
Be me, 14. Be living in North Calgary with Ma. Coming home from being a little shitbird at like 1 or 2 a.m. Skateboarding, pass by Fish Creek Park. The largest national park in the province, actually cuts into parks of the city. Realize it would be way quicker to get off skate and walk through creepy-ass national park. There are coyotes and shit, but how bad could it be? I've got my skate and I could probably smack a coyote if it actually gets ballsy enough to 1v1 me IRL. Start walking. Hear human voices. Ah, it's probably just some older kids goofing around in the park. It's summer and kids come here to drink sometimes. Keep walking down a cemented path. realize I am getting closer to the sounds, not worried about it. As I approach, it starts to sound like a chant. Round the next corner very carefully. See people gathered around a fire, hooded and cloaked and shit. The apparent leader of the chant has a big stick with an animal skull attached to the end. Nope. JPG. Haul ass as quickly as I can, never been so scared in my life. Take the long way around the park in the well-lit streets. Still do to this day cause I'm a little cowardly scrub. I have no idea what they were doing, but there was serious bad juju, and I felt like I saw one of them with a knife or dagger or something.
I worked briefly for a cult in Japan, Kofuku no Kagaku, as an East Asian military policy advisor. You might know them better as Happy Science. I mean, the first thing that should terrify you is that they employed dozens of military policy advisors. The leader was convinced an apocalyptic war between China and North Korea was approaching, so he spent millions every year having guys like me write articles for journals about it. He bankrolled a bunch of Japanese military research, too. It was a crazy time. I met the guy, Ryuho Okawa, a couple of times. He was terrifying. His whole face is the product of endless plastic surgery, and he has these weird artificial eyelids that don't move. He speaks really good English, but has the disconcerting habit of changing accents mid-sentence, which his minders claim is because he's being possessed by the spirits of world leaders. I don't know who, because halfway through our conversation, he started speaking in Cockney. I shit you not.
Best story on X. Jesus Christ. That people like this exist is just. And what, do you have any more stories about him?
Not about him specifically, although there was one really weird encounter. The whole job was a waste of time, but paid exorbitant amounts, so I kept at it for the full length of the contract. But towards the end, I was just fatigued by these people. I'd been asked to write a small treatise on a newish Chinese weapon system that was suspected at the time to be a foil for some of the more squirrely secret shit the Japanese were deploying on their Aegis cruisers. I didn't have a lot of experience with naval weapons platforms, and I just couldn't fathom what these guys were going to do with the level of detail they were after. I end up writing 2 pages about what you'd get if you read the briefs from a mill trade show, which is all I had, and handed it over to one of Okawa's aides who briefed him on his military interests. The guy reads it and says to me, "Could you please elaborate on what the spiritual impact of this weapon would be upon our nation?" I lost my shit and screamed at him, "The spiritual impact is you would be a red smear." He left abruptly. About a week later, Okawa was giving this little speech in the lobby to a bunch of faithful in Japanese. My Japanese is barely passable. But out of his ranting and gibberish, I catch the word redu smiru. Then they all start chanting it. Red smear. Fucking weird man.
I did a video once about my experience with one, unfortunately I got a load of backlash for it. If not for that, I'd have posted it here instead of green texting everything. Stick with it because it may take several posts. Be me. Be 2008 in Las Vegas. Living with some friends. Life's pretty alright. JPG. One night friends decide to drop in on a friend's place. I decide to go with them because why not? Arrive at their friend's place in Summerlin. Rich side of town in Vegas for those who don't know. Guy is this weird Steve Buscemi sorta looking dude with a hot wife who is like 10 to 12 plus years younger than him. Oh yeah, and another wife that is actually closer to his own age. Between each other they have like 5 kids. Okay then. Avi claims to run a production/promotions company. They do events that range anywhere from rave-type events to theater troupe stuff. Mainly based around the underground goth crowd which I was hanging around in at the time. Major influences from cult-like iconography literally all over their promotional stuff and their events image in general. I'm pretty naive and stupid at the time, so I overlooked it. Mostly because I thought it was all just kind of a joke. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit, but basically they were prepping for an event they've done a series of called Anonymity. Take pretty much Eyes Wide Shut, and then throw in industrial EDM music and you pretty much have the idea. Sometimes they branch out and do different things. One year it was steampunk themed, but mostly it's all saturated in that same quasi-Freemason elite imagery bull. B 2012. Been working with these people a lot since meeting them. By a lot I mean that the majority of my life and time and nearly vanished into working on their projects. Friendship started to suffer. My relationship really started to suffer. On top of this, I wasn't getting paid hardly anything either, and most of the money put into their stuff came out of pocket. I was beginning to become pretty disillusioned with these people. Expressed it to the guy who owns the group, and his solution was bizarre. Guy tries hooking me up with someone else in the group even though he knew I was already committed to someone else. His rationale was that because his odd poly relationship worked for him, I should be a team player and do one as well. Guy had already pegged me as a protege, and I didn't know how I felt about that as it is. This is where the cult stuff comes in. When I did a video on YouTube about this, the level of denial these people projected, because somehow it got to them, was incredible. Girl he tries hooking me with apparently left a guy she was with for 5 years to get with me. Literally knew me all of like 3 weeks at that point, and we barely conversed. Typical impressionable goth chick type. A bit overweight, self-esteem issues, comes from a broken home and dysfunctional family. Fell into the group probably because she was desperate to feel like a part of anything at that point. Absolutely obsessed with what they do. Start noticing that a lot of people around my age in the group are there for those same reasons regardless if they really are social outcasts or not. Start noticing the few older people are just losing social dandies like the guy who runs the group. It finally hits me like a rock. All this guy is doing is manipulating younger people who feel like social black sheep into joining his group with whatever they're already into. A lot of these kids are losers still and are going nowhere, but have pretty great talents artistically, so he's just exploiting that to make them feel welcome where no one else would. As aside from all that, they're generally the types who screw each other over routinely and can't get out of the high school goth kid mentality. Once they're in, he extorts labor out of them for his projects and does pretty much everything he can to keep them close by for that tacky reason. I soon find out just how many people he's screwed over, stolen artwork from and claimed as his own, how many people he's financially ripped off, and how badly he's been living in a fantasy world and getting even myself to do so as well. I want out, so I try to get out. Way easier said than done. Now during this time I was DJing for another venue. I figured it would be kind of the easy exit option, as it was starting to become a more successful venture for me than being told that infidelity was the solution to my problems. I started spending more time with the other venue. Try to be tactful to the girl they were trying to hook me up with and let her down easy and tell her straightforward that I am just not comfortable with being a part of something that on the surface seems cool but operates completely differently behind the scenes. Things were alright for just 2 weeks. Events for their goth bull happened weekly back then, don't know about these days if anything is even going on anymore after what all went down. After those 2 weeks, when I go into DJ for the other venue, immediately everything seems off and feels very uncomfortable. People I'd known for a long time didn't want to know me anymore. To make a long enough story shorter, I was being ostracized from people who I considered friends for years and at the time didn't know why. I finally ask around and find this girl had been telling me I slept with her, when I didn't, and then just decided to leave it at that and not speak to her anymore. I also found out that the guy who ran the group had been telling people I stole money from him and tried to cheat on my girlfriend at the time, which was bull because it was his idea. Their entire group decides to back him up on it even though they know it's bull. Unfortunately, I have only a couple of obligations left with them, and because I try to be professional about things, I do what I can to fulfill those before finally giving him the middle finger and telling to screw himself. Shit goes down next. Brief sidetrack here, but words cannot accurately describe how arrogant this guy was. He bragged all the time about having 2 wives at that point like it was a massive achievement and not like what it really was. The ramblings of a power-tripping moron almost 40 years old who wanted to be stuck in his mid-20s forever. Even his younger wife was the same type as the kids in his group. Young, needing attention, found it in the totally wrong place and ended up stuck in this situation. I would have felt bad for her if she didn't defend this to the bitter end. Basically, my last couple obligations were just DJ stuff. I could handle that, no big deal. That never happened. I arrived to do the first one, and on the way there he mass texted everyone on the invite list to go to some other pre-planned event he was doing. I didn't even have gear to spin with, which he had promised to provide. say screw it and leave, go to Facebook and let pretty much all 2,000 people know more or less what went down. Never go to any of their events again and work with other venues exclusively. Didn't matter. These cretins showed up to the other venues' events and started screwing with me even there. People started believing that I was this womanizing abusive asshole who screwed over his entire group. Not a single person in his group would say otherwise, and whenever I spoke up and didn't stand for this bull, it was labeled bashing. Not gonna green text this one. Essentially, he pulled all the stops out and did everything that he could to do a massive manipulation campaign to label me everything he was. His wife stood by him doing this after acting like a friend for over 5 years. The act of leaving this group got me alienated from everyone I used to know back in that town, got me labeled everything from a player scumbag to a thief, even though it was my pocket money that went into their shit. All of this to save face. Point is, cults don't always have to be about robes and rituals. Mainly they're just led by charismatic guys that win you over with charm and keep you hooked with something you're desperate for, which is why so many of them are all over the place. At their core, cults are about manipulation really. For me it was feeling a part of something and friends, and this was the case for a lot of them. I still think it's disgusting that people like this can feel wronged by getting shown who they really are. To this day they deny that they do shit like shit even when they do it literally right in front of people. I can't imagine being that desperate to fit in where you sacrifice even your dignity as a person to do, and that dressing this up as something else will fix it. But of course that's also why I'm not a part of their problems anymore and don't even live in that town anymore. Anyway, that's my story.
I have one. Never shared before. B14 huge loner. Not beta, just introverted and apathetic about idiots. One day I met this girl Greta. So beautiful mind and body. We start hanging out and I'm head over heels. She hangs out around my place all the time, but I've never seen hers. Ask her about it one day. She says it's because my house is on the way home. We walk, think nothing of it. We hang out for years. B16. Greta is my best friend and we hang out almost every day. One day while walking home, Greta realizes something out of the blue and seems to get nervous. I gotta run home, Anon, I forgot something. Thought it was weird but offered to accompany her. Not a good idea, Anon, I'll see you tomorrow at school. Next day at school, she seems really peculiar, acting distant. Try talking to her a few times, but she just responds with basic one-liners. Not dumb enough to be unable to read body language. Leave her alone the rest of the day. Walking home together, we decide to talk about the new Call of Duty campaign. She loves videos, play campaigns with some at my house. Was rattling off some lines from the story. Said a code I heard a Russian say in the prison, Alpha 09. She stops walking immediately, stares off into the ground in front of her. I stop talking, face melts into a curious stare. Statue.jpg. She looks up at me with these blank eyes. She cocks back and square punches me in the face. Fly backwards, taste blood from nose, fall onto grass. Scream out as I clutch my face, only to see her cold gaze. Take a few steps towards me. Nope. Avi. Hightail it home. She's chasing me. Run down the back alley past my house. She's chasing me. I yell out that this isn't funny, I'm hurt, etc. Beg her to stop. She's making these grunting noises and still chasing. I rounded the corner into the street and ran 3 blocks down to where there are some hills off the roads. Run up a hill, down the other side, and duck into a drain area that's hidden. She runs past on the trails into the woods. Crawl out, run home, bewildered. Near the house, see her backpack on the ground. Grab it as I continue walking home. Get inside, open up the bag. Notice for the first time it has a very peculiar odor like burnt plastic. Find normal stuff for homework, classes, drawing, etc. At the bottom is a small gold rounded metallic disc. Disc has weird glyph on the top, and other than that is bare. Toss it up and down a few times, thinking about the situation that happened. Try looking up the glyph online to no avail. Pack her stuff back up, but forget about the golden disc on my desk. Next day, when we get to school, Greta isn't there. Dodgy. Walk home expecting some sort of kamikaze attack from every bush. Nope. Go to sleep. School again. Get to school a little early. Notice Greta's father dropping her off at the front door. Old car, rust everywhere. Looked like it was just a kicker car. He's talking very sternly to her while she stares at the floorboards. He holds up a hand, and like in response, she raises her head, like a hypnotist that has removed his trance. Greta gets out of the car. I walk around the corner because I'm afraid of the confrontation. Meet Greta by her locker. She looks at me like nothing happened. I stare at her, standing not 2 feet away, and she says nothing and just stares back. So want to explain why you kicked my ass the other day after school? She stares sheepishly and says, "Sorry about that, I was having a rough day." Flip switch. She gets all giggly and puts her arm around my shoulders. "So let me make it up to you." We walk to class. Her making it up to me was an extra cupcake at lunch. Forget about this fiasco for a while. Towards the end of the year, walking home again with Greta, season is changing, finally getting hot out. Greta is wearing shorts and I can't stop staring at her. Ask her if she wants to play some video. She agrees, if not just for the AC. Go inside. She flops down on my bed while I sit on the side. She grabs the controller and turns the Xbox on. Notice a really deep scratch on the inside of her thigh, but don't think much of it besides wondering how she got it. Some time passes. I'm playing on my phone. I notice she hasn't moved in a while and fell asleep. Try to wake her up by pushing on the side of her leg. Not the one that's cut. "Wakey, wakey, eggs and backy," I coo. She immediately sits upright and in one fluid motion turns, grabs my hand, grabs my wrist and pulls it away from her, then uses her other hand to grab the front of my shirt like she was trying to hold me in place. "Enter authorization code now." Stare in bewilderment as a creepy feeling starts to begin as soon as the silence falls after her statement. "What?" "Enter beta authorization code now or initiate gamma programming." Brixby-shat.wave. Starting to move off bed, starting to freak out. "Greta, what are you?" I say before she stands up and walks out my door, grabbing her backpack and a piece of food that was sitting on the kitchen counter. Walks out the door and all the way to her house. Follow. A million thoughts. Resolve to think she's had some kind of psychotic break. Maybe abusive parents or home life. Start realizing I know little to nothing about her home life, parents, siblings, or family. Keep her in sight as she gets to her house. Walk across the block as she walks up to her door and go down the back alley by their backyard. Large, dark painted fence, about 7 feet at least. No Harriet the Spy here, not a single hole or break to be able to see in. Get to the neighbor's yard with a small chain fence, hop it, and walk up to the side of their house. Hear movement and voices. Approaching the window, my heart is pounding. My legs feel like lead, and I feel the wind being pulled out of me. I want to pass out. I breathe, try to listen to voices. Hear something about de-escalation. Hear some numbers and words, specifically Alpha 01. Hear a loud thump, then silence. Think this is done, then hear voices very close to the window. It's a shame this had to happen again. Follow up with her later tonight and report to father, a man says monotoned. Remember vividly how dull and straightforward his voice was. Right away. What do you suggest we do in the meantime? A female responds. Same monotone voice but high-pitched and feminine. I'm going to replay footage and add a layer. Can't hear words. It sounded like he said doxed none. Voices go silent, hear creaks, and it's done. My mind is on fire. I crawl back from between the houses, through the backyard, and make my way home. Try to sleep, but see the golden object sitting on the desk. Get up, examine it. Decide I'm going to ask Greta about all of this, and depending on what she says will decide our friendship, because this is nuttier than a Nutter Butter. Next day, see Greta, dropped off by father again. Same thing, he's talking to her sternly, makes a hand gesture. She gets up like a perfect little doll and exits. This part gets a little hazy because so much happens so quickly. Pull the gold disc out of my pocket, open hand in front of Greta. She stares at the object motionless, almost in fear. Slaps my hand, the object goes flying. I pull away and twitch backwards. Move to grab the object. Greta moves towards me, punches me in the head. Body checks me against lockers, people form a circle. Fall on top of the object, she's on top of me pummeling me. Teachers break it up. Greta's parents called to pick her up, suspended. Greta's dad asks what it's about. They bring me in, explain how she attacked me. He asks why. I show him the golden object. Holy dot bump. His face contorts into a wrinkled rage. Stares first at the object, then at me. Feel color draining from my face. Where did you get that, Anon? Greta gave it to me. No, she didn't. Return that. Principal gets perturbed. Tells Dad he needs to calm down. Dad engages rage mode, starts moving around aggressively. Principal Paige is in security. Dad and Greta are escorted out. Principal forgets about the object in scuffle, tells me to go back to class. Go to class. I can't concentrate. My whole life seems to not make sense. Go home. Late at night, hear tapping on my window. Nope.mkv. Eventually I fell asleep. Next day, no Greta. Next day, hear the announcement over the PA system. Greta is dead, died in a car accident on the way home, the day she was suspended. Dad and Mother died too, burned alive. No other friends or family, no burial. Newspaper reports the death with lots of unanswered questions. House sells within a month. It's like she never existed. Keep the gold disc as a reminder. Within 6 months, the disc is gone. Mystery never solved. I thought she was maybe involved in some sort of cult like Scientology or something, but I don't know. The whole thing seemed like one big hallucination in looking back.
A Mormon came to my house one hot summer day trying to sell me a Bible or whatever they do. I decided to be polite and invite him inside for a glass of water, but as I started pouring the water in the glass, it turned into blood. I looked up at the Mormon and I saw his eyes blaze with fire, and I pulled out my revolver and told him to get out and that Jesus compels you and that I fear no evil. He dissolved into a puddle of silver liquid, and when I tried to get a box or something to contain the liquid, it turned into a mist or steam. I accidentally inhaled some of the mist and passed out. When I awoke, I was strapped to a table, and a naked person wearing a horse mask hovered over me. That's all I remember. Then they stuck something on my face. They must have gassed me because I was out cold. I woke up the next day in my house laying in a puddle of piss and vomit. Maybe they thought I was dead. Ended up moving out of that town of SOP and never looked back.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.